Now it's funny, to your point of just how people are more transient and they want to move around more. He's saying he thinks in 5 years, there's the lease model is it's going to be phased out or not anything. People are just going to want to move around, right? You sign a lease by going on to a site. You just pick how long you're going to be there. It's furnished. You can live where you want, do whatever you want. The lease, I mean, you guys are in it every day. That product is so antiquated, and the idea and the way it's structured, so many things in real estate need to be disrupted. And I think that's, when he said it, really clicked me. I think that's the future of just the lease model, is that you can just kind of do it that way.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grenzig. With me and across from me today, John Cohen. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. Got no complaints. We got a awesome guest, new setup.
Yeah,
finally got someone. We dragged him into the office, but it should be fun.
Yeah. So for all of you listening, go check out the video. We're trying to push people to YouTube. We were just talking about it. If you're watching the video, we get like no views on YouTube, so we'll see if we can change that over the next couple weeks. But got a great guest in today. I went to school with him back in college for 4 years. He played on the golf team. I was in soccer. He's been getting into real estate himself when he was down in Raleigh, doing some interesting stuff. So I thought it'd be really good guest to bring on. You know, younger guy doing it himself. You know, just picking up rentals and different stuff at the same time. But I'll let him introduce himself more. So, John Farber, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
happy
for sure.
to be here. Yeah. So. It wasn't, I'd say, a conventional start.
Sure. And,
you know, it's funny. A lot of people, even that know me from the time we knew each other, was very, maybe different picture than what they know today.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, we had some fun.
Yeah.
But things changed, right?
College, a little bit different than real life.
Yeah, very different. Not in a bad way, just different, right? So, long and short of it, I was graduating college, marketing degree, Hofstra. Wasn't exactly sure what my main job or first career path would be, but I had some friends in technology, so I got connected with some technology mentors, and I always had kind of an interest in sales. So I just started reaching out to a lot of people through LinkedIn, through friends, mentors, went through the college, the Hofstra alumni groups, and kind of weaseled in a couple ways there, but found it was pretty easy and had a couple offers, but they all seemed to require me to move. So 2 weeks after graduating, moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina. Had never been, thought it was not what it is. I thought it was much more rural, but it's actually a very cool place. It was up and coming. Moved down there and was doing the tech job all along. The tech job I still hold today with a great company. But they bring everyone down there. So I was just renting, but big into sales, big into self-development, career development, getting better, reading a lot of books. And I feel like if you follow certain people and you read a couple books, it's hard not to get connected to certain routes. You know, and real estate is one of those. You read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You read How to Win Friends and Influence People. The Millionaire Investor, those sort of books. So I was renting at the time, and I guess how this is tied to real estate is as a side hustle. I was reading more about it, interacting more in Bigger Pockets, going to some RIAs locally, and stumbled upon the idea of house hacking. And at the time, I thought I was paying a lot in rent. Had a really nice one bedroom in Raleigh with all the amenities. I think I was paying $900.
Jeez.
And it was beautiful, right? So guys, I don't know, New York's
A little overpriced?
A little overpriced, yeah.
A little bit different.
And,
that same apartment is 4 times the price.
Yeah.
At least. It's insane. So anyway, I started looking into the idea, reading up a lot about house hacking, you know, David Green, Brandon Turner, it's kind of their mantra. For those of you that don't know, house hacking, it's kind of an organic way to get into real estate on the residential side, single family homes. You buy a home that you're planning to live in with very, very favorable financing that you can do because of that. So I was putting down 3 or 5%. The houses were very, very different price point than New York. They were under 150,000.
Sure.
So you could put down, if you do the math, less than 10,000. You own a home, or you own a small portion of a home that a bank owns most of, and you rent out the other rooms, and you basically get paid to live.
Yeah.
Or at minimum, you're living for free, which was a cool way to, as you guys know, you guys are into finance, housing is people's biggest cost, right?
Sure.
If you look at a budget, that is it. So that strategy was cool. Got into it that way, and just continued digging into reading, talking to people, learning. And I found out that you could do one of those a year. So you just have to live in it for a year, at least at the time. Some banks may be more lenient than others, but I don't want to commit bank fraud.
There you go.
So I did one of those. I was in Raleigh for 3.5 years, and I didn't mind moving. I'm single. I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I just moved every year into a house that I could fix up aesthetically, rent out the other rooms, and put down 3 or 5% and cash flow and get appreciation benefits, right? All the typical real estate benefits. So in my time down there in the 3.5 years, did 3 single families, and then the 4th, which I wish I would have known at the beginning, the loophole, you can do up to a 4 unit under that FHA or owner occupied financing. And then I got called back to New York about 2 months into buying that and doing some of the renovations. I didn't even move in yet.
Yeah.
And I was panicking because I thought the bank was going to call the loan due. Turns out with an FHA loan, if your job requires you to move, you don't have to actually commit to that obligation of living in it for a year.
Sure.
So I moved back, and since then I've done a couple other projects. We could get into those, whatever, a flip in Long Island. Now I'm looking at some other stuff we talked about last week, but that's kind of my background and introduction to real estate.
Nice.
Do you still own those homes?
I do.
Awesome.
I do. Just turned over to a management company.
Gotcha. So how long after moving down and like getting it into it and everything did you finally purchase the first one? Graduated, May 2014. When was the first purchase?
So I got down there actually a year after, graduated 1 year after.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
And I got down there in 15. It was probably, I broke my lease. I actually sublet it to someone else because I was so into doing this, and I found a place that met the rules. And it was probably 6 months, but man, I was so nervous going into this. I was thinking like, what am I doing? Right? No one in my family's on real estate. I could lose everything, right?
Yeah.
But the question I kept asking myself, and still to this day, is what is the worst case scenario? What is my biggest downside? And with that strategy, I just couldn't find that many. Yeah. But it was about 6 months.
That's pretty quick. I feel like
that's super
most
quick.
People are way more like, what's the word I'm looking for? Hesitant to like jump in. And they usually, like I was talking to a guy yesterday, reached out to me, called me. I was like running past a deal in Syracuse, like a single family home. You're looking at houses for like 2.5 years. This is a house he found off market for like $40K. The in-place rent is like $875. The same manager is going to stay on, and he's got a mentor that owns 10 homes there that says, fuck, I wish I would have found that deal. I was like, what more do you want?
To do it.
Yeah. I was like, you told me all these deals you looked through. I was like, it checked off all the boxes. Like, I can't tell you whether you're right or you're wrong because I don't know Syracuse, but how much more of a safety net do you want? So I think that's awesome because most people do not jump in that quickly, good or bad. I'm assuming it's gone pretty well if you still have it. So that's really good.
Do you rent those houses out by the bed, or are they just single family rentals to individuals now?
Yeah, so 3 singles and the 4 unit, all by the unit, by the door.
Okay.
None of the room by room stuff.
Gotcha. And how has it been? How is it like your first property, doing the house hacking and like doing a lot of the stuff yourself, and then the transition from taking that from a house hack and then turning it into a normal rental, finding a different type of tenant?
Yeah, so it was pretty easy at the time. Actually, I was pretty lucky because that sounds horrible, but I had a group of friends that the company we worked at, it was all young people relocated from other places.
Sure.
Right. So I kind of just took my roommates with me, and then I would just have an idea of the comps. If it wasn't, when I was living with them, it was on a room by room basis, actually, to your point. But yeah, then when I just leave it behind, now with like Rentometer and just a local agent, or a management company to get some ballpark of it. Yeah, I kind of just turned it over there. I was self-managing all the places when I lived down there, though.
Gotcha.
I don't do that anymore. But it actually wasn't that bad just for that reason. And Raleigh's so hot,
Yeah. No, I mean, everyone's moving there, basically.
I was about to say that whether it was luck or whatever, but I'm sure the Raleigh component made it seem a lot easier than it might have been if you were in, another place or even New York. It would have probably been a lot harder to, one, find a house that would qualify where you could put down 3% on a X hundreds of thousands of dollar house where it's like, wait a second.
Sure. I
got to get really good people in here because if they stop paying, I have a lot more of an exposure. So I'm sure that helped. But, like you were saying, whether, good, bad, quick, or slow, you took the action. You did it. And now looking back, it's like, you said it looked really bad, that it was really easy, but that as it depends. Like the optical look of that is irrelevant. It's getting it done. Like the guy up in Syracuse, just do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the worst thing that could have happened?
Right, and that was the question, just asking myself, and still even today. But kind of what you said before we started recording of just like the consistency, even with a podcast or just taking action on something, is like my best friend and I, and just a little group that we're in, also just an accountability group. That the mantra is kind of more or less, what would you rather have, 80% of something done or 0, right?
Yeah,
it's not a perfect finished product. Just I think if you take the idea that you have a growth mindset and you're smart enough to figure out things as you go, and you're not making the worst decisions, it'll probably work itself out, or you can course correct, right?
Yeah. That's what I tell people all the time, because I know people at 3, 4, 5 years, they're underwriting deals. I'm like, you're not underwriting deals anymore. It's 5 years. I mean, you're either not working hard enough or you're just putting stuff on paper that's never going to happen. So I tell people, just jump. Like the worst case scenario, you're going to lose all your money. That's it. And then, okay, maybe the bank forecloses on you and they're going to come and get the money, but so many things have to go poorly for that to happen. So I'm a big believer that just do it.
To the point from even now where it's like, okay, that actually sounds kind of bad. You lose all your money and you get foreclosed on. But there are plenty of people that have bottomed way worse than that and have rebounded from it. There's a guy I follow on Instagram. He's a flipper in Jersey who is convicted for like 10 years and now he's flipping like 10 homes a month. And look, it's a little bit of posturing on Instagram, but even if it's 1% of that, right now he's flipping homes 1 a month somewhat successfully. I mean, can't get much worse than going to jail for 10 years and coming back out and trying to figure it out, right? If you just get foreclosed on and, compared to that, I'd much rather get foreclosed on than go to jail for 10 years.
I think that's
a way easier bounce back. So yeah, that's to the person who lives kind of a fairly comfortable middle class, lower middle class, or even, a lower class life, getting foreclosed on is not an ideal outcome, but there's a lot way worse things that could happen. So,
but if you pick the right
yes,
area.
But that happens. What's the foreclosure rate in the US? It's like 1% right now. So, it's, right now, yes, it's a great time to do it because it's a very low likelihood scenario where I think people, instead of 1%, they think it's, it might be 20% or 10%.
Yeah.
I don't want to take that risk. And it's not nearly as high as I think a lot of people make out. That's where I'm going with it.
Is that what you guys think is the biggest reason that people don't get in the game, or what I think the reason is people don't get started?
My personal opinion, I think people are scared.
Yeah.
They're scared. Yeah. I don't even think it's the losing the money, the foreclosure, the prison component, right? Nobody's looking at it and be like, well, if I do this wrong, I'm going to jail, right? Like that.
Right.
That's probably not in anyone's understanding.
Right.
I think the biggest fear is the I don't know enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if you want to learn, you can go buy a book, you can go pay a mentor, you can go do all of that. So you want to learn, buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then figure it out, because course correct is so big. Because if you have the wherewithal to buy it, you can figure it out. It's like make another call, find another manager, knock on the neighbor's door, just do something different. But I think it's the fear, and maybe the fear is losing money. Maybe the fear is where am I going to get the money? Maybe the fear is where am I going to find the tenant?
Right.
But I say it's fear. I say most people, if you gave them truth serum, they're going to give you every excuse in the world. But the God's honest truth is they're probably scared. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, it's definitely fear, and I think the fear of failure as well. I mean, there's plenty of people that don't do things because they're scared of being judged by other people. Nobody wants to say, oh yeah, bought a property and I got foreclosed on. Everyone's going to look at you like, wow, this guy's a moron.
Right.
Like imagine the scenario if, God forbid, right, our group of circles found out John Farber went and bought a house in Raleigh and got foreclosed on. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because it happened. It's not going to change, but that's what people think about. It's, oh, everyone at Hofstra is going to learn that I got foreclosed on, or all my friends and family back home are going to know I got foreclosed on. And it's at the end of the day, what the fuck doesn't matter? You got foreclosed on. Like, move on.
Exactly. It's on to the next. Like I mean, listen, I love my family. My cousin said it all the time. Like I remember when I first started doing real estate, and my family's the biggest support. But my one cousin was talking to my brother, unbeknownst to me. My brother told me, he was like, you know, what does John think? Like, you can't make money doing that. Like, what is he gonna like flip houses? You really gonna make money doing that? And I heard that. I'm like, okay, like. You're 10 years younger than me, first of all, so whatever. But I was like, okay, you don't think I'm making money? Fine. I don't care what you think.
Right.
It's going to work. I know it's going to work. But I think people have that fear. Like this, the friends, you know, if you went before that, you know, how many other friends are doing real estate? I don't know the answer to that. But, you know, you did it. You did it. Some other people did it. But it's like you bring that to the table. It's like, oh, I'm going to go buy a house in Raleigh and rent it out to 6 of my coworkers or friends. People are like, you're an idiot. Like, what are you crazy? It's never going to work. And I think people don't want to hear, nobody likes hearing no, right? So you go to a bar, you try to pick up a girl, right? People, oh, she's not going to like me. I'm fat.
Right.
No one has that thought. It's like, no, I don't want her to say no.
Right.
But I say, well, if you ask 100 of them, the sheer shot of it is one of them will say yes. So, but most people don't have that look on.
Is that how you met your wife?
Absolutely. No, I looked up and down on a balcony. I was just walking past her, and she's like, "Look at this idiot." Like, just right. Say hi, and I'm like, no. No, I think people are scared. I think it's the fear side of it. No one wants to be, you know, made fun of, or you know, nowadays if you make fun of kids, you know, shit happens. Like,
right.
Like, I can only imagine the fear today. Back in the day, it was scary because you don't want to be made fun of. Now you make fun of someone and like you get in trouble by everybody.
Yeah. I kind of want to cut back to one thing though, because it's interesting. So I don't think I told anybody because I didn't want anybody to know, but I think, you know, at one point I thought about buying a house near Hofstra and house hacking and doing like the whole basement thing, and you know, where everybody just stuff kids in the basement and turn up a 3-bedroom house into a 7.
Yep.
And I ended up not doing it because it's totally illegal. And it's like, that's not worth the risk. What was it like renting to people you worked with or were friends with? Because that was always another hurdle for me. I was like, God forbid something came up where they couldn't pay rent. I was like, I didn't want to have money get in the way between me and a friend. And I was curious what your thoughts on that were and how you worked around that.
It's a really good question. The short answer would be expectations, right? Like I kind of had a little different view on it, that I wasn't looking at them to make money. I was more or less just looking at it like, if I can cover my basic costs, which are going to be low, which I thought there was no way we weren't going to, but it did cross my mind of, you're changing a relationship slightly,
for sure,
right? If you're just friends with someone, but now you're asking them for rent, or a couple of days goes by, it's different, especially if you live with someone and work with someone, right? So from this standpoint, it was pretty, I would say, clear set expectations. I never did anything with them like, hey, if you pay me early, I'll lower your rent or something, which I do, you know, you can do regular tenants.
Sure.
But it was always just a pretty open explanation and understanding. I did have one situation where, and I knew that this was a possibility because of we were all on the same job.
Yeah.
That he ended up getting relocated, right? And you know, in that case, thinking of it, what would I rather keep intact, or what's the balance here? If I'm trying to really mess up or you know challenge a relationship, it wasn't worth it to me. And we got someone else in, so it wasn't really worth picking at too much. But I would just say in that situation, I was almost going into it with like the lowest expectations, covering the low just principal costs that we had every month. But you know, it did end up working out okay from that standpoint. And I knew these people, I vetted these people. And one of them actually, now we've taken like the exact same track on real estate. He's out on the West Coast and he does something very similar. So it's kind of vetting on the front end a little bit and knowing what the expectation would be and, you know, being clear cut with it, I guess.
Do you think it helped that they worked at the same place? So you know, like job security, you're like, okay, probably a pretty good chance they're not going to get, you know, fired or whatever, or not as much?
I think it helped.
Yeah.
I think it probably helped a little bit. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's just how comfortable are you with it? And for me, I just wasn't comfortable. I was like, you know, if somebody loses their job or like they got to pay late this month. And it was always like, you hear like, don't be friendly with tenants. Like if they're late on the 5th, file or do what you have to do or beat on their door. It's like, I don't want to be that guy. Like I don't want to be banging on my friend's door, which is right next door to mine, and be like, yo, where's your $600 or $400 or whatever it is? And I was just like, as much as I think it would have worked on paper and probably been a good investment because of the area and demand and people are always there, I was just like, it's not worth the potential pitfalls for me.
Right.
So it's interesting to hear that you did it a little differently.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it could have gone either way, right? It just, in the small instance of doing it, I looked at it. This was just sheerly how I looked at it. Kind of that question we asked before: what's the worst thing that could go wrong here?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, even if they don't pay me anything, well, sure, we could not be friends anymore. But still, my monthly cost of living and covering my mortgage in this and gaining equity and all the benefits, it's still lower than what I was paying before, even if I covered this place just by myself.
Yeah.
And that was my worst case scenario.
I mean, you had to qualify for the loan, so.
Right. So that thinking, I think, allowed me to get into it and not worry about that part as much, because I was just thinking, right, like, am I going to let... You could pick at 10 things that would be your barrier to entry. And I think it's smart that you didn't buy the place at Hofstra, because I think we could all agree New York is just horrible for real estate from the rental standpoint, especially now with some of the new laws. But, you know, I just, at that point, and when I was doing it, I was thinking, I just need to get going.
So I was going to ask the question. You qualified for the loan. Your job probably paid you enough money that if everyone stopped paying, you weren't eating cat food, right? You could figure it out. So I think that maybe helps the decision. And then the other question I was going to ask was, tenant moves in, friend, coworker, whatever it is. What type of document did they sign where, like I know what I would do if I had a house like that and someone stopped paying? I'm throwing all the shit out. I'm like, there you go, get out. I don't care. You could be friends. I'm an asshole. I tell people all the time, I have enough friends, right? I don't want to live with my friends also.
Me neither now, yeah.
But, you know, if I'm putting random people in there and they don't pay me, it's very simple. You owe me money on the 5th. If you don't pay me, your shit's out. Now, I don't know if you signed a lease and I'm not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably a little bit different, but
there's no evidence.
I didn't do it. Someone came in and only threw your shit out. Coincidentally, you didn't pay. No, but
what are the odds?
Exactly. What did they sign to give you security that they would pay, and or if they didn't pay? Like New York, you'd have a hard time throwing people out.
Yeah.
Raleigh, totally different.
Right.
What did you put in place? Because the other thing I told Chris, because he brought it up to me all the time, I said, why don't you just pretend that you don't own the house? Not pretend. Management company, and you pay your rent,
or it's my uncle's, or whatever.
Exactly. What did you do, or documents? What did you put in place to maybe mitigate that? And expectations, I think, are huge.
I did. It's funny you say that. I did use a little bit of that strategy, because the first property I got, I actually did with a partner, and I would, anytime if I needed to. It was a little funny because they knew him too, but not enough that they would ever, let's say, if I needed to. I'm not saying this was like a card I pulled all the time, but just making sure you're ready if needed, was that I could use him as a leverage point if you need a bad guy, right?
Yep.
And you're going to be living with these people all the time, an uncle, a friend, whatever the situation is. I don't think most people that aren't in real estate know how to look up who actually owns the property or who does what. So, you know, from that standpoint, I think there was one instance where I did it. I just said, hey, it's him kind of asking for this, you know, and it was from that standpoint. But yeah, it was, I didn't have to pick on that too often. And I see what you mean. Like, yeah, the date is the date, right? That's it. But, you know, it just, I think they also had it from the standpoint of, and they know you too, if they lived with you. I think also being with them, they wouldn't want to face you if they weren't paying.
Correct.
Right? So, like, I think there's both sides of it. We're looking at it from the lens of, what if all of these things happen? But I think they're also looking at the sense of, if I stop paying, living here is going to be horrible.
Yeah, because it's not. I think two things. Because my friend did it in Massapequa. It worked out brutally. No one paid. And he had a structural problem with the chimney, and it was a disaster. And the hindsight, he probably wouldn't do it again. But I think New York's a little different. And I mean, he had kids sleeping on the couch. He was doing everything. Nothing right, because he, once kids stopped paying, and okay, I'm not going to ask you. You'll hear, want to sleep on the couch? Give me $100. So it was this. But if I lived in your house and we worked together, I look like an asshole if I stop paying my rent, because he knows, the 4 people that live there all know. You go out to lunch, you talk to people, you sit across the desk. Like, I know for me as an individual, I don't ever want to put myself in that situation where it's like, now everyone knows I don't pay my rent. Like, I know that I think that that's another component that maybe you never even thought of, or maybe you did, but no, I think did, people, renting to a stranger off Craigslist.
So different.
Little different than friends and also coworkers, right? Friends and coworkers are different. You worked with all them, so you had a little bit of security, maybe not. These are your friends. You didn't know about their job security. And if they lost their job, you might feel bad. Okay, hey, I won't ask them for rent. This is different. So I think that, that component is probably another element that probably helped the decision to go forward with it. Because I know me personally, as a paying tenant, I'd be utterly embarrassed by not paying my rent.
Right. And that's us. I think we'd all feel that way. And now back to your point of, was it easier because we worked in the same place? Now thinking it through, definitely for that reason too. There was a social aspect of it that, and I hear jokes about it too, like, oh, slumlord, whatever. Because they know like you're renting out to friends and maybe making money, right? Yep. And I didn't care about that. Fine. I don't mind. But, that part of it for sure. Because I think, again, in a business setting, everyone, reputation matters and there's a social aspect to it. It's very different than, because when this happened, man, I'm thinking about my living situation in college. We don't need to get into it here. Similar to this, where it felt like 5 minutes. I went from one side of the table to the other, where our landlord couldn't have been the bigger enemy on the planet. I mean, this guy was everything that we didn't want.
I think there's definitely some carryover from that as well. Same group of people. So
right. And that group, I mean, we did not treat that place well. No. And we, looked at it so differently. And we looked at this person like a villain, behind a curtain, right? And that was very different than, I think, the idea of what we're talking about here, which is house hacking and having a little dynamic. And I'll be the first one to say it's a sacrifice, right? And I don't like living with people now. I like to, if I'm working, come home and just have my space. But again, kind of, I guess, coming back to this, maybe a little bit of the theme here of like just taking action on something. For me, it was, even if it's sacrificing for 3.5 years and moving out of that luxury $900 apartment in Raleigh, which was sick. I definitely missed it. Yeah. But this was what I thought I just needed to do. And I didn't even necessarily love the idea of living with people I worked with. Again, for that social reason too. Like, you don't have privacy, you don't have separation. So, it's a small sacrifice, but I thought the benefits outweighed.
No, but the sacrifice is important. It's the book, he just had me read. It's called Quitting Like a Millionaire.
Okay.
A big part of it is you can retire, they take basically like the investment part out and they say they look at the amount you save per year, it speeds up your quicker you could retire on that same amount. So it's if you can sacrifice by, instead of, let's say you make $100,000 and you want to save 25%, instead of living a $100,000 lifestyle, you live a $75,000 lifestyle. It's the same concept, whether you're sacrificing, putting in hours and time and relationships to house hack, or you're sacrificing your lifestyle. It could have been, instead of, doing the $900 a month, moving to, a C-class apartment and paying $600 a month, and you save $300 or whatever it is. It's the same concept. I think most people in real estate get that. As you kind of get into
I think you have to.
Because you got to come up with money from somewhere. People that are trying to buy shit with no money down, right? Move on. I don't care. It's not happening for me.
It's not. And
you're not buying real estate. You might be creating cash flow, but two totally different things.
Correct. So. And I think that you touch the sacrifice behind being a real estate investor. It's huge. I look at it now, even after I read that book, and I play around my finance situation daily, and I'm
Same.
I mess around and I'm like, okay, how can I live like I make less? Then I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, wife, kid, nope, that's not an option. And my health insurance.
Can't toss one of them out.
Yeah, I got a mortgage and health insurance. I'm like, well, can't sacrifice those.
Right.
So then I look at it, I'm like, I can't fucking do this. It's just not possible. I'm going to start selling organs, because it's like, this is crazy.
You got a few spare ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, okay, who needs a liver, right?
Yeah.
But I look at it sometimes, I'm like, I envy someone like yourself or the people in the book, or in the situation where it's like, okay, I don't need to live in the $3,500 Class A apartment in Long Island. I can go live in I wish I could do that.
But you also did a lot of that prior to.
No, I'm in a different place today than I was when I first started. When I first started, I lived with my parents. I had no expenses. I saved up money from my job before I quit my living expenses are X. I don't have to make a nickel for 2 years, and I have money in the bank.
Right.
So I did that. Now I try and take that philosophy today. And even my partner, Don, he says all the time, he's like, everything you do can't be an investment. You have to have some type of fun. And I'm like, well, yeah, no, I would, I look at it, it's like, well, if I buy this deal, my cash flow will pay my mortgage. And if I buy that deal, I could potentially do this. That's how I look at everything. And maybe it's a fault, but I envy that sacrifice of making that decision to not, splurge 24/7 in a Class A building in Raleigh, a single guy. I mean, could you have asked for anything better than that? Yeah, maybe, house hacking, right? But
yeah,
that's a huge part, is making that sacrifice. And people listening, I hope they hear that, because if you want to do real estate investment and be an investor full-time, make it your full-time job, you got to give something up, because you're not going to make money the day you decide to be a real estate investor. It's like, I'm quitting my job cold turkey and being a real estate investor. Well, how are you going to get paid? So you have to make a sacrifice. And I think that's the most important part about any real estate investment. Forget the fear, forget all that, but something's got to give. There's got to be a give to do it, because you don't make money just sitting there analyzing deals.
Right. And it's two things come to mind hearing that. The first is, all of the extra spending, I find, comes in little incremental stages, right? And then you get out there and you're wondering, how did I get here with, 2 Canada Goose jackets, the Rolex, the Breitling, the car that I can't afford. And it started one thing at a time. But at the same time with that, I think this will resonate with what you just said, for people that are looking to attain financial freedom, right? I was just doing goal setting yesterday with my coach, right? And we were going through, what are the long-term goals, the short-term, the tangible, right? Financial freedom is a big one for a lot of people, right? And what was really, had to change for me was, I think you can go through stages of it, right? Especially who you're listening to. If you're listening to Grant Cardone, your mindset's going to be different than if you're listening to, let's say, Gary Vee or Patrick Bet-David, whoever you're consuming, right? Or Brandon Turner, some of the guys on Bigger Pockets. For me, though, I think there's two thoughts. I think there's the guys that are eating ramen and they're financially free off $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And they're not making, they're not spending more than that. They may split a car with 3 people. They may live in a house that's paid off, that they, rehabbed and whatever. And they're financially free, but I don't look at that as financially free personally. I think you can only save so much, but you have to make more at some point, or invest the right way, or have strategies to build equity, wealth, and cash flow so that you can, I guess, elevate that a little bit, right? I think the goal is financial freedom, but there does need to be some sacrifice. But I think a lot of times, it's hard to find that balance. And I do the same thing. I assess every dollar I spend. And especially if you read, Kiyosaki, you're like, why am I buying anything that's not a return, right? Why am I buying anything that depreciates, right? I got into that. After I read that book, I was like, the next $500 I'm only spending on laundromats, right? Gumball machines, right? Why would I buy those shoes? I don't, and I think you go in waves with it, but to that point, finding that middle ground is probably huge. And you're in a different place. You sacrifice at the beginning, but I think it's, for me, I don't know if it'll ever be ending, right? You always are kind of inching in both directions.
I do too. I sit down with my wife sometimes and I'm just like, well, if we do this, then this expense is paid. That's why I look at everything. I'm like, well, this deal, I'm going to invest money in it and this will pay my cars and then this will pay my health insurance. That's how I look at everything. And it's a horrible way to be because I'll sit there at night and my wife will wake up. It's 2 a.m. I'm reading something about how this can pay for this and I wish I didn't. I just my personality, but I do agree. It's who you listen to and what books you read. You can't. There's the difference between the $30,000 financially free and what financially free is, and I think defining that is super important because there's no way I can physically live on $30,000. It's not possible. I have a daughter and a wife, and my health insurance is for the family is very close to that. So it's like, okay, I read that book and I'm like, how'd they do it?
Right.
What can I cut out? Maybe I could just pull my daughter's teeth out instead of going to the dentist. I look at things like that. The other day, my wife had to get a molar pulled. And I was like, well, if you have to get any more teeth pulled, there's a bottle of whiskey and a pliers. I'm not paying for that tooth. That's ridiculous. But
that's hilarious.
You just,
I don't know if you're going to stay married much longer.
No, probably not. Some things I say, I'm always like, what? You can't do that. Your daughter needs, I
don't think it's bad to question, but it's, I think there's plenty of people that don't question it at all. And they're, you read the savings goals for the US, it's not, I don't think any of us are coming from a place of being on a high horse, but it's hard to relate to some of that.
Oh yeah.
We're thinking of it probably a little further on the other side of the spectrum. We're not all the way there because we're not the 30,000 a year, but we're trading off all the time. But, you know, I think a lot of people have no regard for it.
No.
Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah,
People don't even give it.
There's plenty of people I'll, you know, like meet out or like see from school, and I'll just like dip a toe into like the water of like saving and investing. They look at me like, what? Like you have how much saved up? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, it's crazy because it's just not a mindset that I think it's not taught.
No.
Right? It's not in school, the saving, investing mindset. So you've got to learn it one way or another. And if somebody doesn't introduce it to you, or you're not naturally curious, or you don't have that, like that was my parents. They both saved their entire life and live way below their means. So I was like, okay, I've had that example since I was fucking born. Right. That was just there for me. There's plenty of people that don't have that. So it's okay, how do you find it? And it can be such a foreign concept that if I make $75,000, I don't net out 0 at the end. I net out 30 or 40 or 20, and then I can put that away. And then in 25 years, I've built up enough, and hopefully you do it on residual income and not, if anybody's retiring and they're taking out money from principal, I think that's the dumbest idea, but a whole nother topic of conversation. But hopefully you get up to a point where you can live on $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, $20,000 a year, depends where you live and what you like to do. That you don't have to worry about that anymore. But if you're not taught or shown, it's tough to just stumble across it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's not taught.
No, I think it's because people, especially where we live in New York, I mean, you're going to work in the city, your friends are going out for drinks and dinner every single night. If you have never given it 2 cents or thought about it, how would you know? You know, coming from you know, how you grew up, you wouldn't know. It's like you're either going to see your parents do something, you're going to do that. You're going to see your friends, you're all going to do the same thing. Then you're going to go get a job where you make significantly more money than you ever have. And your initial reaction is like, I joke around, but I was like, you know, how does someone get to 800 pounds? And my joke is, well, you know, you have one Oreo and you're full. Then you have another Oreo. Next thing you know, it's like a box of Oreos does not satisfy you. Right. And that's how you get to that point. But like, you know, there's a point where you look at it, you're like, okay, do I need another sleeve of Oreos? But the answer is yes. And that's the same thing when it comes to money. It's like, okay, I lived at home. I went to college. I made no money. I did whatever. Now I'm making $65,000 a year. It's like, okay, well, I'm going out to drinks every night. I'm going to dinner every night. And you're not even conceptually thinking about the ramification in the future. And I think without stumbling across or being interested, it's not taught anywhere. No one teaches you about it.
Yeah,
there's more.
Right. Definitely not.
I was talking with, I forget who it was, but we were talking about going back to college or staying in a job. And it was both very much agreed. Continuing to work and make money is way more desirable because you can go and do things. But it's, again, if you don't continue to live below it, you know, like especially in New York, it's the worst. Anybody that has any minor success goes out and buys a BMW or a nice car or moves into a nice place or, you know, buys their first home that they're going to live in. And it's just like, I can't believe it.
Yeah. And I think you really nailed it, that if you're not, it's what you're exposed to, right? Correct. It's your environment. It's the people you're around, you know, the top 5 and all that. But it really is like around here. I don't want to say anything too bad about Long Island. It is home for me, but moving down to Raleigh and then coming back here, I was like hypersensitive to the idea of seeing what all these people are doing from like a showing out standpoint and constantly just like spending more than they have and make and being rich, not wealthy, right? And not setting themselves up for long term. And I think just, to that point, they just weren't exposed to it, right? They don't focus on it. Like after reading some of these books, One Thing or like any of the Kiyosaki stuff or, you know, Ramit Sethi, you know, doing that, it's like now it's such a focus for me that I feel like I can't, you know, every week I'm doing my net worth. Every week I'm doing my financials, right? I knew you'd be doing the same because you're thinking about it, right? Like it's kind of that mantra of like, you know, your results are what you focus on, right? Similar to that point, but it's all connected.
No, you have to keep up on it because I don't. And I'm going back through this year and I'm like, I've spent some dumb money, especially on food. I've spent way too much money on fucking food where it's, especially with Seamless, it makes it very easy.
Too easy.
I was sitting on my couch last night and I had dinner. I'm trying to lose weight because I have a daughter. I'm trying to get more healthy. I'm not doing a good job. But I was sitting on my couch last night, and my wife, she cooks every single night. She's the greatest.
That's amazing.
And she bakes if I tell her to. So last night we finished dinner. We put the baby to bed, give her a bath. She goes upstairs. I was sitting on my back thinking about ordering a piece of cheesecake on DoorDash. I was disgusted with myself. I didn't do it, but I opened the cabinet and there was nothing in there to eat. I was like, I don't want a cookie. I don't want a bowl of cereal. I need something sweet. So I'm like, ooh, caramel peanut butter chocolate cheesecake. Like, I'm going to order one of those. My wife's like, that sounds disgusting. I'm like, no, it sounds delicious. It's $9 and it's going to get delivered in 45 minutes. But I said, okay, it's 7 o'clock. It's going to get here at 8. I decided not to, but you're right. You can go to an app. I was like downloading Uber Eats, DoorDash. I'm clicking buttons trying to see how I can get a piece of cheesecake delivered because I was hungry.
Yeah.
It was a horrible thing to do, but the ease of spending is so easy, especially on food.
Oh, man. It's everywhere.
Yeah. But to where I was going with that, not that the Cheesecake Story wasn't great.
But I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
I was proud of myself.
Yeah. Was the only reason I save up is because a lot of my money that I get, I invest before I can even take it in and spend it. Where there's a lot of people that take it and then it just starts going slowly out because I look at my bank account sometimes and I'm like, how the fuck do I have no money in there? Because I spend it on other stuff, but I also invest in other things first. And there's something, what do you always, there's a book or something that you always talk about where it's like
profit first.
Yeah, profit first.
It's another good one. I talk about
probably
paying,
one I need to read.
It basically paying yourself, but like taking the money and it allocates it properly. So you're actually making money. But the biggest mistake I made as a real estate investor, or one of the biggest mistakes, was bringing on people to work for me early on.
Nice.
And no, but see, the difference is you put your money right into the deals that you get paid more or less, right? And maybe it's too much information for people.
I don't care.
But I brought on a couple friends and, we flipped a house in Bethpage and his portion of the flip was like 12 grand. And I knew he had no sense. And I love him. He's my best friend. He's come in here a couple times. And I knew that if I gave him 12, new suit, knew this, and I knew it. So I said, do you want me to hold the money back and pay you in a weekly $12,000 check? Or you want your money? He's like, money here, boom, money. Quit. 3 days later, he was done. I was like, that was a mistake. And I did it 3 or 4 times. And I do it. I did it early on frequently. It's like, okay, I need help scaling this. Why don't you help cold call? Why don't you help driving driving around looking at properties? And when something happens, I'll take care of you. But it's almost to a T every single person like, yo, no, give me that big fat check. And I'm like, you should really not take all of it. You should put some of it into the deal, or you should take it and do this because that will earn money. You're going to take 12. You're going to see 12 in the bank and you're going to be like, oh, wow, $300 for a suit, $600 for a watch. Next thing you know, there's no money in the bank. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I made as, help, I try to help people put themselves in different situations, but they whip through the money like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah. Dude, you got to get Mint. You got to get the Mint app. Dude.
Well,
that changed things.
Yeah. No, I have Everlance that tracks everything, but it doesn't like
Personal Capital is good.
Yeah.
And I have like 17 apps. And I'm like, which one do I like? But no, you get an email. Mint's great because you get an email, like a summary, like you're an idiot and you spent way more money than you should have.
Weekly,
It's actually really good.
I do think net I'm better than most.
It's how you use them.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I said net I do think I'm better than most, but it's because very rarely have any money to spend. So it's not like I'm
we don't pay him, so it doesn't.
I don't even get paid.
He can't spend money. We don't pay anything.
Yeah. I'm hoping we get advertisers, so if you're listening, I could use the money.
If you're out there.
No, but it's, you spend the money and I'm not sitting on 30 grand in my bank account where it's like, okay, it's if you have money, dead money sitting there, you look at it and you go, I can forgive it because it's there. But if you don't have fucking money, you're like, shit, I've got tax coming up. I've got a credit card bill. You're like, oh, fuck, maybe I can't go spend $1,000 on new clothes, or I can't go out that night, or I can't spend, I can't go sit front row at a Knicks game or something like that. It's, you know, I'll go sit up in the nosebleeds. It's, you know, you
Who
start
wants
picking
to sit front row at a Knicks game.
one day.
There's much better ways to spend that money.
Yeah.
But
lighting it on fire in your bathroom.
yeah, it's probably more entertaining.
Besides the point, all right, Nets game.
But to that
when
point,
they play the Knicks,
it's funny you say that actually. And this isn't my full approach because now, like, I'm not a Dave Ramsey believer, and I think he's for a different subset of people, right? People that are in that group that we're talking about that's here on the spectrum. We're here, just no thought. But it's funny. I heard very early on, like, everyone's got different beliefs on this too, kind of like that financially free thing. And like Grant Cardone, his philosophy And it kind of resonated with me. I kind of enacted this early on, but it was like, he's like, why are you holding on to money?
Yeah.
Just put it in all your deals and you'll be broke. So you'll know you need to hustle for more deals.
Yeah.
And I thought there was something to that because I am the type of person that I think I perform better when there's urgency and that when there's an action driving it, right? Like I'll learn in my sales job too. Like I will learn everything I need to about a deal or a product when that product is in the deal. But if I'm just trying to learn about it every day and watch modules, I'm not learning, right? But when that urgency is there, you become an expert in no time, right? It's amazing. I'm a little more centered on that belief now that I want X amount of reserves for X amount of months for each property. But after that, I kind of believe that philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Of just going.
I mean, it's just,
I agree with that.
What's your motivation? And you're creating motivation for yourself, whether it's,
burn the boats.
Yeah. Skin in the game or, you're teetering on the edge of you're going to have no money.
Right.
Both of those are very good motivations for people. So,
well, I mean, so I agree with that 100%. I'm definitely like that. There's nothing like motivation when you have a mortgage payment and the money's not there or whatever. Like even in sports, because we all played sports, like you see like teams 8 innings go by and you don't have a hit. It's like, oh, I don't want to get no hit, and then you win the game.
Right.
It's just because when you're running out of time, there's a sense of urgency that now do I think you should leave 18 cents in the bank or 25 cents in the bank and live your life like that? No.
Right.
But I do agree that urgency is super important. And I think that if more people in the real estate world and investing in real estate, whether it's, house hacking, multifamily, whatever your strategy is, you got to have I need a deal by this day. I want the deal to produce this cash flow. If you set those goals and you have that time, as you get closer to the time, you're like, oh, wow, I've made 4 cold calls and I should have made 5,000 cold calls because the date's coming up. So I think that the urgency is super important.
You'd really like the book 12-Week Year. It's similar to that point of just, it's kind of like this law you hear on a lot of podcasts, Parkinson's law, that you will allow your action to expand to the time you give it. You give yourself 8 hours, you'll do it in 8 hours, but you could have given yourself 2 and you'll do it.
Correct.
Same concept here.
Yeah, it's like time blocking. It's like make sure you get it. I'm going to spend 2 hours on acquisitions today, cold calling.
Exactly.
And then you put it in your calendar, it pops up, you cold call, you put everything else aside. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, that's to a fault, and maybe shouldn't say this, but that's our biggest problem on every deal we do.
Absolutely.
We think we have way more, we have 60 days to close, 90 days to close, but it's like, okay, no, you really have to do this thing in the first week. You don't have 90 days to get that thing done. Right. You have to set deadlines, even though technically there not really is a deadline. And there's plenty of stuff that, I do think we've gotten better at it this year.
Absolutely.
But it's still, for us, one of our biggest challenges we're getting done. It's right, guys, like if we don't do it this week, like, we're gonna have other things we have to, it's gonna delay other things. So it's a really interesting point.
But you guys pull it together in the end, I bet.
Somehow.
Sometimes.
Right?
Sometimes I look at it, I'm like, I don't know how that one got, I don't know how we did it.
Yeah.
But I also think, I Monday morning quarterback, like it's good to evaluate what you didn't do right. But I hate sitting there. It's like, God damn it. Like we should have done this differently. That it's good if you say that and then implement it on the next deal.
Yeah.
When you have the same problem every single time and you never assess it, that drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's if you continually make the same mistakes over and over that you're not improving.
Correct.
You learn from, as long as you learn from your mistakes and improve on it.
There is no one out there. I don't care who's listening. I don't care if it's one of our investors, but they're like, you guys aren't experienced enough and you're making too many mistakes. There is no sponsor, I believe in this 100%, is not making mistakes. It's how they address those mistakes and they don't make them again. The most sophisticated investors out there are making mistakes every single day. It just happens because you cannot predict everything. But it's how you address your mistakes and how you fix your mistakes. And if you make the same mistake over and over and over again, then it's your fault. But mistakes happen. It's just, that's life.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with the termites.
Absolutely.
We had a deal in Jacksonville, had a termite bond on it, so we didn't think we needed to get an independent inspection because we thought, well, there's a bond, it covers it, everything should be handled. They would move in, a couple termites that only come out 2 months out of the year. They start coming up, people start complaining, so we had to fumigate 5 of the buildings, and we're like, all right, shame on us. So now we know, we'll spend $1,000 every deal to make sure we'll get a termite inspection, regardless if there's a termite bond on the property.
And what it covers, because we found out in this situation that they basically neglected the termite bond and it voided a huge portion of the termite bond because they owned the deal for 20 years.
Right.
So,
and that was our 5th property in this area, had never come up. and it was our manager's like 30th property in that area.
Yeah, and she was
in that
born,
area
yeah.
over, you know,
How would you
15
guys
years.
know?
So
Right.
it's like everybody was on the same page, and it's like, okay, like I guess, you know, something that nobody knew. And, you know, is
Even
it
the
shame on
bank.
us? I mean, yes, because we cost the deal money for not knowing it and not covering it. But was it something we realistically should have known? I don't know. It's up for debate.
Correct. That's like even the bank. You know, the bank, oh, termite bond, you're good. Like there was a lot of people that said we're okay. I mean, even there's a story. We owned a property, was not in a flood zone. We did not have, my partner, we did not have flood insurance. There was a flood. Very expensive. So he learned his lesson. Now on every deal we do, we put flood insurance on it, especially if it's not in a flood zone, because it does not cost that much money if you're not in a flood zone.
Right.
If you're in a flood zone, of course you're going to get it. But if you're not in a flood zone, the bank's like, oh, no flood zone, you don't need flood insurance. Well, guess what happens when there's a flood? You're not covered for anything.
Especially if you're somewhat near the coast.
Especially, if I was in Nebraska, maybe I'm not putting flood insurance
Right.
on it.
But it's also
if-
probably going to cost you next to nothing.
Correct. You probably should put it on regardless. But you're in Jacksonville, Charleston, Savannah. You're up and down the East Coast where tornadoes, global warming is destroying things. Just do it. It's not a flood zone, so it's a low risk insurance.
What's the reason not to? Yeah.
Yes, but you learn. You do it once, and now you do it every single time. And now we know on every deal, regardless of what's in place, it could be the best termite company ever report. We're going to get another one just to
100%.
verify it.
Yeah.
And there was no evidence of termites. It's not like, listen, we know in the Southeast there's termites. We did the due diligence. There was no evidence. It wasn't like there was evidence of termites, but it was a different type of termite. And now I know a lot more about termites. But
way more than I ever thought I'd know
won't
about
make that
termites.
You
mistake
learned about
again.
it because you're put in the situation.
Correct.
So, that's how you know.
But what are you doing in real estate now? Because now you're in New York.
Yeah.
We didn't drag you up here from Raleigh. You're here.
I'm here.
What's the new strategy? Because I think that's you did the house hacking. You own a 4-unit. What are you doing today?
Did Chris tell you all about this at all? Or
Yeah,
no?
it was a sort of self-serving question. I know the answer, but I'm intrigued.
It's a new strategy though. It's funny. There's a small group of people doing it. When I say small, I'd say a lot of millennial investors, right? And that's kind of why I'll give a little plug for my little podcast that I just kicked off, tailored to that group. I think what you guys are doing is the goal for most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even my goal. I was talking to Chris about this last week. Down the road with more experience, and also when I max out my bank loans, and I look to do this, let's say, more, and I'm maybe a little bit more financially free or able. I think what you guys are doing is a lot of people's end results, syndicating and value add deals, and it's a really cool business, right? So from that standpoint, a little niche that some millennial investors have gotten into, and I'm really interested and pretty excited by it. It's called rental arbitrage or short-term arbitrage, but it mainly consists around just the new platforms that are short-term listings, right? I actually am kicking one off today in Alexandria, Virginia. It's going to be the first one that I do as just a pure rental arbitrage play. And the concept is this for any of your listeners. And I have a couple of friends that are, they're sponsors, but they're also limited partners. And it's a new idea. It's an interesting concept, but there's a lot on it with YouTube and online learning and stuff. But and the Facebook groups are amazing for this stuff, by the way. It's very cool and a lot of interaction. But basically what the idea is, you are doing the WeWork model of multifamily real estate or even residential real estate, where WeWork is taking a lease on and then they're breaking that down into, let's say, the retail version of it. What this is you go to landlords or you go to people that have leases and you become a tenant, and then you subdivide your lease on a daily basis, right? So you lease something for, let's say, $1,000. You can then put on Airbnb and gross, let's say, $3,000 to $5,000, right? So you have a spread there that you can cover your operating costs, but also do pretty well. And for me, it's a really interesting strategy right now because we're in an up market, right? I think we'd all agree it's harder to find deals. It's harder and harder to find, let's say, layup cap rates, right? Or yield. And in an up market, there's also a bigger vacation and travel group, right? People travel more, right? So I think this is a good way to hedge, let's say, some capital in an up market where you don't want to buy a bad deal, but you can also mitigate so much of your downside, right? Like I think what are the headaches as a landlord, right? Your big CapEx expenses, a boiler, a roof, a flooring issue. You guys could probably termites. You can name probably 50 more than I can, right? But this model is cool because you can get into that space of cash flow. Now, granted, you're throwing equity out the window, but you're throwing away also with your equity a lot of risk, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm focused on now. I'm kicking off one of these. I have a couple friends that are doing this up to 50 units. I have a couple friends that, without owning any real estate, they're under 30 years old. Their Airbnb revenues are $30,000 a month. And that's without owning anything, right? It's a very interesting model. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but that's what I'm focused on right now.
Yeah.
So I loved it. You came in the office the other day. You were talking to Chris. We spoke about it afterwards. I called my brother. I was like, so I heard this at first. I was like, oh, this is going to fucking blow up in everyone's face. But then we were talking about it, and I called my brother, and I was like, yeah, this is and so in our office, we're multifamily focused. Someone brings me an idea, and I'm looking to hire someone to let's build this platform out. Let's be the full service real estate investment company. So I loved it. I thought it was really attractive because I think you can hedge yourself, where I originally thought it was going to blow up because you have every, this guy, whatever. But now I'm looking at it as like, you know what? It could make some money while you ride out this wave. I also think that people are more transient today. I don't think this is as true. Millennials up and leave, and they're going, and people are not, they don't want, the house, the yard, the dog, and 2 kids. That's not the American dream anymore.
Not at all.
Millennials and younger people are getting up and leaving. I'm going to live in Raleigh for a month, and then I'm going to go live in Pensacola for 2 months. And people are traveling. And if you can cater to that demographic, I think it's a strategy that could work. So I'm really interested by it. I think it could work. You're kicking one off, but I do think that it's a viable strategy to work, and I like it.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, and this is someone else you guys should definitely have on. A good friend of my brother's, and he was kicking this off hard in New York. Now the one downside, the biggest downside I see, people always say, yeah, but is it legal or you're a landlord? It's legal, and it's all on the up and up, right? I don't want to operate from any low integrity position, right? Like it has to be legal. And the way you do it, it's beneficial to landlords too, right? Like you're getting your money, you're keeping it in amazing condition, and you're maybe paying extra deposit or rent. Sign me up. I wish 7 people would come to me for my rentals. That's why I think I was having success pitching it to other landlords from the standpoint of, why would you want to do this, right?
Yeah.
Because landlords hear that and they're like, no, I don't want random people in place. But anyway, what he was doing with it was he scaled it up. He had 40 of these in the city, right? Then New York City, we've kind of touched on a little, it's a tough place with some business regulation right now, right? So he had to scale it down, but he was doing exceptionally well with it, right? And now it's funny, to your point of just how people are more transient and they want to move around more. He's saying he thinks in 5 years, there's the lease model is, it's going to be phased out or not anything. People are just going to want to move around, right? You sign a lease by going on to a site. You just pick how long you're going to be there. It's furnished. You can live where you want, do whatever you want. The lease, I mean, you guys are in it every day. That product is so antiquated, and the idea and the way it's structured, so many things in real estate need to be disrupted. And I think that's, when he said it really clicked me. I think that's the future of just the lease model, is that you can just kind of do it that way. But as far as the arbitrage goes, it's huge, I think.
I agree, because real estate is the most, you look at all the technology advances that are happening in the world. Real estate is still like a pen and paper business. It's not,
right.
I mean, I joke around. We say it all the time. You close on a real estate deal. Like the residential space, you still actually have to go and sign documents in an office with 4 people. I'm like, this is mind blowing.
So I
have one tomorrow, and I'm just the stack is going to be this high.
It makes no sense.
I was in this for like a year and a half, and then my mom sold her home, maybe even 2 years. She was like, yeah, I'm going to the closing. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I was like, what do you mean you're going to the closing? She's like, yeah, you have to go in person. And I was like, you have to go in person? And I didn't realize that was a thing, because it's been here and everything's electronic. And my dad was like, you don't have to go in person. I was like, no. I was like, why would you have to go in person? I was like, there's internet, there's e-sign. I mean, what's the point?
We're buying a mobile home park, and we're sitting at lunch with the owner. last week. I'm sitting there eating a grilled cheese with bacon. And he's
Healthy.
like, yeah, broke the rule. He goes, can we just close in my attorney's office? It's going to be easier. I was like, what? I was like, why don't we just sign them? Like, you could FedEx it. I could sign it in front of a notary if you'd like. He's like, well, my attorney really would just prefer to do it. I was like, it's 2 hours away. No problem. I'll drive there and I'll do it. But I said, you do realize we don't have to do it this way. He's like, yeah, my attorney's a little old school. I said, that's the problem. Although that's why we're getting a really good deal, because that is the problem. But
Right, little double edge.
it's mind blowing to me that but the real estate business in whole is so.
You better hope he doesn't hear this before we close.
I think the whole business has to be shaken up, because everything else is like, there's technology. Like, kids don't even work anymore. Like, offices are done. Like, people work from their home. Like, my cousin works for she does marketing. You're like 2 days a week you're allowed to work from your home. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
When I was working, I had to wear a suit and tie every day to my job.
So
like, if I called up and I was like, guys, I'm gonna make some cold calls from my house today, they'd be like, you're fucking fired. No, like, you're not doing that. You have to be here at 7.
Right.
You tell kids today they have to come to work at 7. They're like, whoa, that eats into my sleeping time. I had a guy. I think I told you the other day. Oh, so a buddy of mine, contractor friend of mine, he did my house. A very good friend of mine. This kid's not even a kid. He's an older guy, but he flew in from California. He's no longer working in California. He told him he works on a high efficiency schedule. So my friend's like, the fuck is a high efficiency schedule? He's like, well, I really only work really efficient 4 hours out of the day. The rest of the time I'll go to Starbucks and I'm brainstorming. He's like, get the fuck out of here. You're not working a high efficiency calendar. I was like,
Sounds like something out of California.
I was like, I shook my head, but I don't know if it's a thing or not. I don't know if it's whatever, but
Right.
but like kids,
There's so many more progressive like office and work mentalities now.
yeah. I mean,
crazy.
kids, and not just kids, but people are like, no, I only have to work 3 hours a day. Like my cousin, like we'll go on vacation. She has her phone. She's like, oh, as long as my phone's on, logged in, it's like hours. I'm like, really?
That's different.
Those are hours. You're drinking right now. And we're on a boat. That you are not working. No. I'm working. My work phone's on.
I don't think that's an allowed thing though. I think that's a
we won't
a
let them hear
workaround.
this.
Yeah.
No, exactly. But it's crazy. But
Yeah.
like this is a strategy. It's really cool. I think that you find I think it's you can't just go and pick up a Class C market in the middle of nowhere. But
No.
if you find the right thing, and I'm sure there's a metric and a way to do it. If you do find it, I just brought it up to our property in Jacksonville. I said, why don't we're across the street from military base. I said, why don't you contact the military, see if friends and family want to come in or they're having training. Rent it out.
100%.
Hotels will rent, or whatever the legality is. Hotels will rent for $70, $100 a night. Rent it for $50 a night. Our rent is $600 or $800. $800, you rent it out for $50.
Killing
You're crushing it. You're doubling the
killing
rent.
it.
You're doubling the rent.
So what that's called is a short tell.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, right, like you get into this world, or I did at least, and you see how there are the people that are getting started, and then you see what the model can kind of change into, right? And you almost go from being a real estate investor to a manager with great systems, or like a hotel provider in some sense, where you're doing just professional short-term management for a great spread. You could do it on a regular place too. The hedge is, I think, kind of why people are doing it now in an up economy. But it's funny, like the person, two people that have kind of gone through the entire cycle of scaling this up to 30, 40, 50 units, where, the cash flow is amazing, right? And now what they've gotten into is a little different strategy, almost more like your defined corporate housing, or they're going to an apartment complex and taking on that entire inventory and saying, hey, this section of the complex, we're just going to take on, and it's corporate housing. We're going to service our clients through this, right? We're going to furnish it, quality control, all that. And it is different. And then the other model that people have, I'd say, grown into, this is after they're making, let's say, well over 6-7 figures doing this in revenue, is I've seen people go two ways, but they'll partner up with landlords that are looking to optimize their property. So now they're totally getting out of the overhead space. They don't even own the furniture. The landlord buys it and they just do profit share on it. And then the manager develops amazing systems, virtual assistants that they can run this business with 200 mom and pop landlords with zero downside and only upside, right? Very interesting. I'm sure you thought of that.
And that's what our manager brought up. She's like, well, we could do it in a corporate lease and you can get over this hurdle and there's ways to do it. But like, there's an Instagram ad that pops up on my phone all the time. It says, I manage my properties from the beach. And I for 7 years, I've been saying, you can't do that. But now I literally.
For 7 years, you held on.
So I haven't clicked it yet because I only imagine the ads that come up after that.
Respect.
But now I do think a strategy like this, you could buy 2 or 3 places or not buy, rent.
Yeah.
There's a million ways to skin the cat, but I think you can do this from the beach.
Yeah.
If you do it properly. And I think that's something that people should hear. But the other thing is like how you bought your first property in Raleigh 6 months. This is something you're going to listen to. You're going to get excited about it, and then you'll do nothing.
Right.
The only thing I worry about with this, and we spoke about it and a couple ways to address it, is it's just purely a margins game.
Yeah.
Because you don't own anything. And I worry about the supply and demand all the time because you get it from both sides. One is, let's say this blows up and it becomes the new wholesaling or something. Now all of a sudden you've got, Raleigh is fairly probably balanced on supply and demand for regular leases. Now all of a sudden you're going to come in, whack out a bunch of leases for people that are trying to do short-term rentals.
Right.
So the lease market is going to go up because there's less supply. So now your margin from the bottom, where it was $1,000 a month, is going to go up.
Yeah.
Now you've got all these people trying to book short-term rentals. The demand probably hasn't changed much in there. So now the margins from the top are going to come down. So now instead of booking it at $50 a night, you're going to have to book it at $30
then
a
you
night.
start
or $40
buying and you're getting help from those higher leases.
Right. So, but that's where I'm going is, I'm just worried because when you own,
right,
you can continue to build equity and you're not solely reliant on the cash flow side. You obviously 100% want to make cash flow, but it's a little bit different when you don't own anything. It's also too, what is your liability for if you have 100 doors and $1,000 a month in leases? Where the hell are you coming up with $100,000 a month if you are now liable? What's going to happen in that case? So, how is the lease structured? I'm sure there's ways around it. I'm sure it's addressed and we don't need to go into it, but those are just the things I think about. So for people listening, like, oh my God, I can go out and make $4,000 a month doing this. One, there's operating costs, so take that out. That's just revenue. But two, there's other things that are going to go into it. So I just, we've only talked about the upside. I just want to make sure that people that are listening to this that maybe didn't think about it, there is some downside, just like with everything.
Yeah.
But that's like, I think your major, there's obviously insurance and liabilities and stuff like that. But like, if you had $100,000 and you want to allocate 5% of your money towards a strategy like this,
100% agree.
You play around with it. But you got to remember, your downside is worst case scenario, if you can't fill it up, you have 12 months on a hook for your $12,000 exposure.
You have a vacation place for 12 months.
And then you go down there, you write it off. So
that's also how I
sublease it to a full year tenant and you break even.
That's also how I stumbled into the strategy a little bit, because I was thinking, I heard someone say it like this, and I was thinking, this is the smartest thing ever. You can have vacation homes wherever you want then and be paid to have them and go on vacation, right? I mean, it just so happens the places that I'm kicking these off, it's not a coincidence, are places I like to go. South Florida, Raleigh, Pinehurst, DC. You kick them off in these places, also in places that have demand for it. If you can overlap on both, there's ways to do research. But to your point, the world blows up. Airbnb turns belly up. Every state gets regulated. It's different than if you are, let's say, buying something that caps out, the cap rates only work out with this strategy. You're fucked because you can't give the keys back at 12 months, right? In this strategy, that is, again, the hedge part of it that really stands out to me is just give the keys back.
And it's a cash flow point play.
Because where you were talking about the new rental laws in New York, there's plenty of people that had rent stabilized apartments. Their valuation just got killed because of the new laws. Yeah. So, like everything else, there's upsides and downsides that you got to understand going into it. So as long as you're okay with, hey, I may be on the hook for 5 leases for 8 months if Airbnb goes under, or, Virginia passes laws that you can't do Airbnb arbitrage. Like, you just have to be okay, have the income coming in or the cash cushion or, the ability to pay it off or sublease it. As long as you've got a fallback plan and you can mitigate your downside, you just got to understand what they are.
And I'll sell Portno the furniture.
There you go.
That's a small downside too, yeah.
But there's definitely downside to it. But like I said, this is Grant Cardone, stealing his motto. you buy a house, you're stuck for 30 years. You can't just sell your house unless you want to take a bath.
Yeah.
You rent a place 12 months, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, now let's say you can't do the Airbnb, it blows up. Maybe you're not supposed to sublet it as per the lease with the landlord if you did not do a good job negotiating it. But, rent it. If the market rent for a rental is $1,000, rent it for $600, you cut your cost, you have to pay $400 a month.
Exactly.
So there are mitigation. There's ways about it. I think it's a really cool strategy. It's something to research. It just gives someone another taste of real estate because
it's 5%. It could be a dip in the dip it down the water, diversify your portfolio into the short term.
It's like buying stocks, bonds, mutual funds. It's the same thing in the real estate space.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's an awesome
I agree.
Awesome place to wrap it up. But yeah, John, thanks so much for coming on. It was awesome. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, hear your podcast, all that fun stuff, where can they do that?
LinkedIn, Bigger Pockets, Facebook. It's amazing now. I guess the last thing I'll say, it could be like a quick tip.
Sure.
The groups on Facebook for real estate, I had no idea how collaborative they were and how, I looked at it the same way. Facebook is dead, whatever, or no young people are using it. The activity in these groups is amazing. So I find myself actually on there more doing tons of networking with operators in territory and learning and posting from different people. So that's probably a good way. LinkedIn, Bigger Pockets. Just message me there, email. You can put it in the show notes, whatever. And happy to talk with anyone.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Cool.
Awesome.